Yeah, when I went in the meetings, I would just seem like I'm just there to be the actor and ready to get the gig. I wouldn't reveal that I actually need to have authorship in order to feel fulfilled. So I think that for them, sometimes that might have felt like a rug pull, because you're trying to assert yourself into something that we didn't hire you to do. And so it was a really strange position to be in, because I felt like I don't want to just be an actor. Like I want to have more authorship.
The courtroom tension was palpable, the air thick with anticipation. No one expected Blake Lively's legal team to drop yet another bombshell, but here they were, preparing to amend their lawsuit against Justin Baldoni and others. According to her attorney, Michael Goddell, they were not only adding fresh claims, but also dragging new defendants into the legal battle. The stakes were rising fast, and today's 90-minute hearing was just the beginning of a storm that no one saw coming. But was this a genuine fight for justice, or just another high-profile game of legal chess? Blake's team had already been granted an extension until February 14th, Valentine's Day, yet that wasn't enough. They were now pushing for even more time, requesting an extension until March 5th. But Judge Lyman wasn't buying it. The court had already been generous, and now it seemed like Blake's team was playing for time, trying to shift the board in their favor. Despite their persistence, their justification for the delay raised eyebrows. Their key argument? They were planning to call in additional witnesses, one of them being Jenny Slate, Baldoni's former co-star in It Ends With Us. Jenny had publicly voiced her support for Blake, once standing firmly by her side. Blake is a leader, a loyal friend, and a trusted source of emotional support for so many of us, she had declared, condemning the attacks against her as baseless. At first, it seemed like she would be a strong ally for Blake's legal battle. But then, in a shocking twist, Jenny distanced herself from the case entirely. Despite once speaking in Blake's defense, she refused to testify, leaving Blake's legal team scrambling for another way to strengthen their case. Still, they weren't ready to give up. Determined to bring Jenny into the courtroom, they attempted to subpoena her, convinced that she had her own uncomfortable experiences with Baldoni that could turn the tide in their favor. But skeptics weren't convinced. Was this a strategic move to amplify Blake's claims, making them appear more substantial? The maneuver didn't land as expected, leaving her attorneys with no choice but to pivot yet again, and that's when they made their next bold move, requesting another extension. Lyman, however, wasn't one to be easily swayed. He pressed for a valid reason, demanding to know why they suddenly needed even more time. Blake's team delivered a lengthy, overly complex explanation, arguing that they needed to incorporate new parties to the lawsuit. One of the major names they introduced, Jed Wallace and his company, Street Relations. According to them, Wallace had filed a separate 10-page lawsuit in a Texas federal court that overlapped, requiring more time to properly. It might have sounded reasonable at first, but Justin Baldoni's attorney, Brian Friedman, came prepared. He wasn't about to let Blake's team control the narrative. Armed with solid evidence, he reminded the court that just weeks earlier, his own team had requested an extension during the devastating Los Angeles wildfire, a request that Blake's team flat out denied. And yet, now, they expected the same courtesy from the court? Friedman wasted no time exposing the hypocrisy. Despite the lively party's inexplicable refusal to grant an extension when we requested one during the wildfires, we have no objection to their request now, he stated. But there was a catch. If Blake's team got an extension, Baldoni's team would demand one too, and that would push their response deadline all the way to April 15th. It was a power move, one that forced Blake's team to reconsider their aggressive legal strategy. The legal team representing Baldoni and his production company, Wayfarer, wasn't particularly fazed by Blake's attorneys gaining extra time. Their stance was clear: take the extension, but understand that it works both ways. If Blake's team had more time to refine their case, Baldoni's side would ensure they had equal opportunity to build an airtight defense. Just when it seemed like the tension couldn't escalate any further, Friedman unleashed one final revelation that sent shockwaves through the courtroom. He exposed a critical misrepresentation in Blake's legal argument, one that threatened to undermine entire. Blake's attorneys had been working hard to paint Jed Wallace as the reason they needed more time, suggesting that his legal action had complicated their case. But Friedman wasn't about to let them get away with. With calculated precision, he pulled out irrefutable evidence, the real timeline of events. In a stunning twist, he revealed that it wasn't Wallace who had initiated legal proceedings first. It was Blake herself. On January 21st, well before Wallace had even responded with his lawsuit, Blake had already filed legal action against him in Texas state court. The revelation shattered their argument, flipping the narrative on its head. The lively party conveniently failed to mention, Friedman stated with quiet intensity, that the ongoing litigation in Texas was initiated by Ms. Lively herself. She filed legal action against Mr. Wallace in Texas State Court on January 21st, roughly 2 weeks before he responded with his federal lawsuit. The courtroom fell into a stunned silence. The implications were massive. Had Blake's team been deliberately misleading the court, attempting to manipulate the timeline to gain an advantage? And if so, what else were they hiding? The courtroom tension was palpable as Blake's legal team scrambled to regain control of the narrative, but the cracks in their strategy were beginning to show. Judge Lyman, unimpressed with their repeated attempts to delay proceedings, delivered a swift and uncompromising decision. Instead of the month-long extension they had desperately requested, they were granted a single extra day to submit their amendment. The air in the room shifted. The realization that their tactics were unraveling settled heavily on their shoulders. Slumped posture, exchanged glances, and hushed whispers revealed what they refused to admit aloud. Their grip on this case was slipping fast. But just when it seemed like things couldn't spiral further, they did. Blake's team had worked tirelessly to muzzle Brian Friedman's gag order, hoping to prevent him from speaking to the media. That move, however, backfired spectacularly. The court outright denied the request, meaning Friedman was now free to publicly discuss every facet of exactly what Blake's team had been trying to prevent. It was a brutal miscalculation. Instead of silencing their most relentless opponent, they had handed him a mega. Friedman wasted no time using it. Then, another devastating twist. Over the weekend, Justin Baldoni's legal team made a bombshell move, launching a dedicated website containing a fully amended legal complaint, a meticulously compiled 168-page timeline event, and most damning of all, previously unseen text messages allegedly exchanged between Blake and Baldoni. This wasn't just an archive of legal documents. It was a digital minefield of receipts, evidence, and damning exchanges that left no room for ambiguity. It obliterated any hope Blake's team had of keeping key details buried behind legal red tape. With the case now fully exposed to the public, the walls were closing in, and fast. The more Blake's team fought back, the more they found themselves cornered. The pressure escalated further when Blake's husband, Ryan Reynolds, was unexpectedly pulled into the scandal. A resurfaced text from Reynolds to Baldoni painted a stark contrast to the current battle. "This is going to be incredible. I happen to adore you, Justin," he had written, expressing early enthusiasm for It Ends With Us. What once seemed like a friendly endorsement now carried an entirely different weight in light of the explosive lawsuit. Desperation crept in. Blake's attorneys made a last-ditch effort to have the website taken down, arguing that Baldoni's team had no right to publicly release such information. But the court, once again, was not having it. Their ruling was clear. Blake's legal team had already engaged in media battle, using major outlets like the New York Times to frame their side of the story. If they had no issue making their claims public when it suited them, they couldn't turn around and demand that Baldoni remain silent now that he's fighting. At this point, question was no longer Blake. It was whether she and her team could withstand relentless blows they were taking. Every legal maneuver had back. Every attempt to control the kid slipped further grasp. And with each setback, the looming reality crushing loss became more evident. But the real nightmare, the staggering $400 million lawsuit hanging over, this wasn't just about reputation. This was about financial survival. Even for two A-list stars like Blake and Ryan, such a loss could be catastrophic. Their future projects, endorsements, and investments were all at risk. Fallout from this loss could reshape the stakes couldn't be higher. Every ruling, every new piece of evidence, and every strategic misfire pushing them further. Was there any way for Blake's team to claw their back? Or was this the beginning of the end? The battle was far from over, but with each passing moment, it looked more and more like the tide had turned against them. What do you guys think? Is there a path forward for Blake, or has her legal battle reached the point of no return? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next shocking update.